right. What's up, everyone? Matt here with Down Once More, coming at you with some initial thoughts, reactions to The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 3, The Path. So before I get into the episode, if it's your first time here, check out the time codes in the description. Eventually, I will get into some spoilers for future on in the games, but I've got that noted in the time codes, and I'll give you a heads up before I get into that as well. I want people who haven't played the games and don't know what's coming to be able to experience that in the show for the first time. Now, I am by no means an expert. I've played the games, loved the game, want to talk about it, get some thoughts out, and just my initial reaction to the episode. So, let's get into it. One thing I want to call out from last week's episode that I didn't mention because I recorded right after I watched it, hadn't seen all the online stuff. Ashley Johnson, who was the voice actor for Ellie in the games and did the mocap for her as well, sang the song at the end of the episode, Through the Valley. So at the end of that is Ellie's voice actor performing that. So thought that was a real cool, fun fact. This week's episode, I wasn't quite sure what to expect. I figured with the chaos and how amped up last week's episode was, like it felt like a penultimate episode of an HBO series. The action was cranked up to 11. I saw people comparing the big battle in Jackson to Hardhome a little bit from Game of Thrones, and I have to say I feel like those are kind of apt comparisons. So this week I kind of thought we'd have a little bit of a scaled back episode with kind of deal with the fallout from that, and that's exactly what we got. So the opening shot of it being nighttime and just all the infected, the burned and just shot, killed, mangled, infected outside the walls of Jackson with fires burning was a real powerful shot. And I felt like a nice way to kind of bring you back to the carnage and remind you of everything that took place. Because we spent most of the end of that episode, you're focusing on what happened to Joel, and that's what's fresh in your head. And so reminding you of everything that Jackson went through as well to open the episode, I feel like was powerful. And then that scene where at the end, Gabriel Luna and Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin, after the episode, they talk some, if you're watching on HBO Max anyways. I think if you're watching on HBO, it has that little bit of after the episode as well. But Gabriel Luna then he talked about it, kind of viewed it as the one-man wake for Joel when Tommy's cleaning up his body. And I felt like the visuals and everything in that scene was very powerful, seeing the brothers' emotion. Because that was one thing, if you watched my recap last week, that's different from the game. Tommy's there with Joel, and when Joel dies instead of Dina. So that's one of the big departures from the series, the TV series, to the games, is Dina has a lot bigger connection to Joel in the show than she did in the games. In the games, they don't really interact much. You don't really see any dynamic there. Where here, she's with Joel, and when he dies, granted, she's knocked out because of the drugs Mel gives her. And you also have the moment in this one where Ellie's mad at Dina for withholding information on the people who did this to Joel, where Dina says, like, I loved him too. And so you have that extra motivation behind Dina wanting to go to Seattle with Ellie, which I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But overall, I felt like this was a very strong episode, but it did kind of tone things down and take a step back from last week. I feel like I know why you had to do it. You're building up, like Neil Druckmann even said after the episode, they got to do what you don't get to in the game, which is spend time on the mourning and the grief period. Because the game is like, you got to keep things rolling. You can't spend like an hour period just going through these motions and the grief, which you get some in the game. You go through and kind of the walkthrough of Joel's house that Ellie does. It's Ellie and Dina's hanging out downstairs from the very get-go because they're about to head out of Jackson. And Ellie's walking through, kind of gathering some supplies and reminiscing a little bit and going through those emotions and those stages of grief. I don't remember an exact time frame in the games, but I do not believe it was 3 months. Because here we get the call out and you get the card after Ellie just kind of wakes up in the hospital in a panic, reliving, envisioning what Abby did to Joel. And then you get her recovering 3 months later. That's how long it took for her to recover from the injuries that she sustained. Looked like maybe some punctured lungs, rib. Doctors having her test her lung capacity, kind of blowing and something. I'm not a doctor. But we do spend more time with that grief, and we get to see Gale do a little bit more. I was curious what Catherine O'Hara's character was going to do now that Joel was gone, what kind of capacity we'd see her in. And we saw it a few times with this. We see that she kind of sees through Ellie's bullshit, Ellie just kind of giving her the cliche buzzword answers that she knows that she wants to hear, because Ellie's smart. Ellie knows that this is just blocking the road to get out and get released from the hospital. And she's not really great at processing her emotions. Her and Joel are very similar in that way, where they will internalize and they'll hide their anger and they don't want to let people in. They're very closed off. And so Ellie doesn't want to open up to Gale. We saw Joel do it a little bit more because in the first episode of the series, and Gale even calls out to Ellie. She's like, Joel said that he wronged you. But it was weird because he said how he wronged you. He said that he saved you. And she could tell that he was upset with this. And Ellie doesn't really give her anything. She's like, I don't know. He never wronged me. I'm not sure what it could be. He saved me lots of times. I don't know. I just need to let that go and not carry that. I forget exact the words she gives, but very therapy speaky that Ellie is giving Gale. And we have after that, I'm jumping around a bit because this isn't a full recap on the episode. These are just my thoughts and what stood out to me from it. Dina tells Ellie, like, hey, I have this information. Don't be mad at me. I didn't tell it to you earlier because I know that you would have just ripped out your tubes at the hospital, ripped out those IVs, and you would have gone after them right then. And that would have done no one any good. And if we know where they're going, why not wait till they get there? And so you get this kind of sense from the beginning that Dina's in it with Ellie from the get-go. Like I said, she makes that comment about she loved Joel too, so she wants to seek justice as well. And they go and tell this to Tommy. Tommy's pissed because he didn't know this already, and that Dina withheld information from him as well. And then Tommy says, we got to take it to Maria. We got to take it to the council, give them the chance to vote. It was interesting, too, because Ellie tells Tommy, if it was you, Joel would be halfway to Seattle now. And Tommy calls her out on it. He's like, no, he wouldn't have. If it was to save me, then yes. But if we lost people, Joel just took that on himself and just kind of closed up and saw everything as his fault. He wouldn't have gone after him. He knew when to cut the losses there. Telling Ellie, he was my brother. Don't act like I didn't know him. And I thought that was a really real reaction from Tommy, because Ellie sometimes in the series has the opinion that her relationship to people and how she views it is all that matters. And Tommy's letting her know, like, no, you weren't the only one that had a relationship with Joel. He was my brother. I know him basically better than you do. Granted, they'd been separated a little bit, but they'd seen some shit together and been through some stuff. And I don't know. I liked seeing that dynamic, and I have mixed feelings about the town council meeting. I was wondering what the whole point of the council was. We saw them a little bit in the first episode when Ellie tells them about her interaction with the infected. I almost called him a walker, like it was The Walking Dead. With the infected, the stalker, that seems smarter. And like they were hunting her, which we'll see if that comes into play more, or if it's just kind of a little bit more of a nod to the game players, and kind of setting up what we had in last week's episode with the infected. We're using other infected as insulation from the snow. But this council meeting was very different. It's a town hall council meeting. Everyone's getting a chance to say their piece. And we see the different sides of Seth, the good old bigot that Joel decked in the end of the first episode, speaking up, saying, like, we can't just let them march into here in our house. We have to go get revenge. We have to go get vengeance and take them out. Otherwise, they're just going to come back here and they're going to be laughing in our faces. And we saw the other side in Carlisle talking, telling them basically, gotta just forgive and forget. Let them go. That's what separates us from Raiders. And then Ellie gives this speech talking about how it's not about revenge. It's not about vengeance. It's about justice. And that's what separates them from the Raiders, is they're wanting to take care of each other, and she would do the same for anyone else. She's hoping they would do the same for her because they know that she has their back, and that's what separates Jackson. It's not about just her. It's not about Joel. It's about us. It's about everyone. Council votes. They're not going, and of course, Ellie's backing up. She's going to go out anyways. Dina comes in just very level-headed. Ellie is the kind of impulsive, just wants to go on the emotion, that anger, that gut reaction, that need for justice, if you believe it. I think she's getting to believe her own bullshit a little bit as she gets on with her speech. But Dina's one level-headed, like, hey, you can't just bring weapons. You got to bring medical supplies, provisions. You got to prepare. You can't just wear your Converse when we're going cross country. Let's get you some boots. And Dina's just a very strong partner and has those other kind of characteristics and dynamics that Ellie lacks. Ellie has the passion, the drive, and that anger, that fire, but Dina's got it a bit too, and she's here. She's got Ellie's back, ride or die with it a little bit, and they head off to Seattle. We get another moment of not necessarily vindication is the wrong word, not even really redemption, because he fucked up before with how he acted, but Seth seeing that, hey, you can be a little bigoted, you can be a bit of an asshole and still have that person's back, even if you don't necessarily agree with them and like them. Because Seth's the one that pulls together the provisions for Dina and Ellie to be able to head on out to Seattle. One other thing we get in this episode, because the episode ends, Dina and Ellie get to Seattle, right? But we also see flashes of this group. It seems to be a religious group. They're talking about a prophet, almost cult-like. They all have scars on their cheeks. I'll talk about it a little bit in spoilers when I'm talking about the game later on, because I don't want to give too much away. We'll just talk about what we know from the show. This group seems religious. At the front of the pack is father and daughter. They communicate by whistling. They're talking about this prophet, that basically they're spreading truth to others. They're trying to run away from war. They're trying to find peace. They're trying to create distance. And they start to get ambushed by wolves from the WLF and go hide in the woods, is what we get earlier in the episode. And then at the end, Ellie and Dina come across all their murdered bodies, just riddled in bullet holes and bullet casings everywhere. They know it's not Fedra because they're all different types of bullet casings. And even the little girl is killed. And so they see this as almost a little bit more motivation that we're doing the right thing. These people, and this was Abby's people that did this, they're monsters. We definitely need to go and take them out. We need to take care of this. And then go on with their mission. And the episode ends with kind of a sense of impending doom, because Dina and Ellie kind of have the assumption the WLF can't be that big. Dina had heard of them from Eugene. He'd mentioned them in passing, and it can't be that big of a group because they never heard of them besides what Eugene said. But then the episode ends with all the military tanks and soldiers in their body armor and helmets and weapons just marching through, heading to the FOB, the Forward Operating Base. Manny, one that of Abby's party that kicked Ellie and broken her ribs and all the other damage that we're assuming that he did, is on a lookout in the tower. I wasn't quite sure. He was maybe in the Space Needle, but just on lookout, and then you see all the soldiers moving to the FOB, the forward operating base. And I don't know, we see that Ellie and Dina are going to be in for a hell of a time going through Seattle. It's not going to be as simple as they think, maybe not even just to find Abby. One thing I want to call out that was, well, two things I'll say that were different from the games that I don't think are spoiling anything. In the games, Tommy leaves first impulsively against Maria's wishes to go after Abby and everyone. He leaves in the middle of the night, doesn't tell Ellie, he leaves a note for Maria, takes a horse and goes. And that's why Ellie and Dina are going to have to sneak out to go after them because Maria's put everything on lockdown. And so Tommy headed off to Seattle by himself. Tommy's still in Jackson. He still stayed there, even though he is motivated and he does have the emotions and kind of the anger about Joel's death. Ultimately, from what we've seen so far, he cares more about following due process and the safety of Jackson and his wife, who's running it. So that's one big difference. The other is the conversation that Ellie and Dina have in the tent during the rainstorm when Dina asks Ellie to rate the kiss from New Year's Eve, and they have some back and forth there. That in the game takes place earlier. I mentioned it in my review last week that it's not Jesse and Ellie who are together. It's Dina and Ellie that are together, and then Tommy and Joel. So Dina and Ellie, when they're posted up hiding out in Eugene's weed safe house to ride out the storm, they end up being in the basement, getting a little high, having this conversation, making out, getting it on a little bit, and then Jesse finds them in the game. Here, they have the conversation. There's not really a follow-up kiss or anything like that. Ellie just says that, she's like, you were high, and Dina says, yeah, and you were drunk. Ellie rates it a 6. Dina's like, fuck you, a 6. That's awful. Dina also reveals that she had already gone back to Jesse and makes a comment about Ellie being gay and Dina not, so she hadn't experienced that, so she was curious if she was any good. And then they have a little bit of a conversation about Jesse. Dina says that you think that Jesse's kind of sad and saying if there's something going on there. And they both kind of acknowledge it and see that there's something going on there with Jesse too. And he's never told Dina why or anything going on. So I'm curious if we'll see a little bit more of Jesse's backstory eventually as the show goes on. But I don't know. I felt like it was a decent episode. It's hard coming off of the emotionally draining episode that we had last week and all the action that took place there. But I did enjoy it. It's setting up what's to come. It spent some more time with the emotions and feelings of these characters. You also had some more interaction with Tommy and Gail, played by Catherine O'Hara, the therapist, where Gail's just calling out, like, Ellie is a liar. She's not someone who lies. She's a liar. She thinks the only person that she's maybe ever been truthful with was Joel, who's dead. And Tommy just has the fear that Ellie's going to do something stupid. And so we'll see how it plays out. It looks like next week's episode, we're going to spend a little bit more time with the WLF. We're going to be introduced to Jeffrey Wright's Isaac in person, who we got name dropped in the first episode. Sounds like he's the leader of the WLF. We're going to see some infected. Looks like a little bit. We see Dina pull a gun on Ellie at the end of the teaser. We'll talk about here in a bit. But yeah, that's where we're at with this week's episode. So now, some spoilers from the game. Okay, so I am torn. We did this in episode 1 with showing Abby and her motivations right off the episode. And I said, man, I feel like we're taking away some of the gut punch and some of the impactfulness of her character and seeing that kind of brutality and then learning why she did what she did, getting a little bit more sympathy. I don't love the introduction of the Seraphites or Scars. so the Cole group with scars on their face from the game. In the game, you're introduced to them much later on in the game. I think it's day 2 or 3 of Seattle. You're actually introduced to them. Otherwise, you're just reading some notes, letters, seeing some strung up bodies. But they seem like they're this group, these almost like demons in the trees that communicate by whistling. They seem haunting, terrifying. And we're laying out that, hey, these are sympathetic people that are longing for peace is kind of how they're being portrayed in this episode. So we're already humanizing them more than the game does, and I feel like that's going to make that the arc that comes to play. This is spoilers from the game territory, so you can't get mad at me. Abby's whole transformation with Lev and what's the other one's name? Lev and I don't know. It's been a while since I played it. But you see Abby's kind of turn around towards her opinion on the Seraphites, and we're already establishing that they're humans. I mean, we obviously know they're humans, but we're already making them sympathetic, and I feel like you don't get to see. I don't know. I don't love it. I feel like it's not going to be able to have the same emotional impact and really see and experience that transformation with the character. Because that's one thing when you're playing the game and you play as Abby, it's this person that did just this heinous act, murdered brutally Joel. And then you're kind of playing through and you're seeing her motivations and you're playing it as her. And so you're kind of seeing that perspective change and seeing why she did what she did, what's driving her, and how she's starting to question the way that she's been taught and raised, essentially. And I feel like now we're already getting that view of, hey, these people, they're not just vicious, murdering savages. They are humans. They're driven by the prophet. They're driven by love, family, connectedness. And so I don't know. I don't love that move. I also don't. I don't dig the council. I don't like the addition of the council. The speeches didn't really do anything for me. Yeah, Bella Ramsey, they delivered it great. But I don't know. I didn't need that extra piece input there. Now, I get you want to talk about the people of Jackson, speaking about, like, we're already vulnerable as it is. We don't want to sacrifice 16 people. We need to look at the greater good. But in the game, you have just Tommy really being haunted by everything and then just going off on his own and feeling like he had to. And then Ellie and Dina going off on their own, kind of with Maria's blessing and getting that. I feel like those interactions from the game, I feel like they're important to the story, especially Tommy's character arc. Where it goes in the game, I'm not really sure if we're going to be getting there in this series. Also, I said in last week's episode that it looked like maybe they were going to cut out the pregnant Dina storyline. I don't think so. We got Dina puking in the woods after seeing the bodies here, kind of making excuses to Ellie already. She made the comment about already going back to Jesse for a while. So I think we're going to get pregnant Dina in the series. Sorry. One of these days, I'm going to get to actually watch the episode as it airs and get one of these things recorded and out before midnight. But not going to be this week. So, I don't know. A solid episode. A number of differences from the game that I have differing opinions on. But we'll see. I'm still going to have faith. Craig Mazin, Neil Druckmann, they haven't let us down so far. Besides the Tess getting infected by making out with an infected and the tendrils that make out in season 1. Why? Unnecessary. So solid episode this week. I think we're going to get a little bit more action-filled episode next week. But a nice kind of character study and those moments this episode. So got to see Bella Ramsey's character, and I really appreciated seeing more of Dina's side of things. And I do like that we're giving that character a bit more depth and connection and motivation in the series. So we'll see what's to come. We'll give these showrunners some faith and see you all next week for the next review of The Last of Us. On Wednesday, the actual podcast episode drops, kind of what's coming to streaming and theaters in May. So make sure you tune into that. Last week's episode of the normal pod talked about the top 20 musical duets on Broadway, off-Broadway, things like that. So if that's your jam, make sure you follow, subscribe. We're right on the precipice of 100 subscribers on YouTube, so help us get over there. Like, comment, share, all that fun stuff. Let us know in the comments what you thought of this week's episode. Tune in next week, and don't forget to go down once more. Later.